Hello folks, I'm Max Muir from Robert the Bruce, Genius of Bannockburn. Here with me today, my friend and colleague Mark English from The Spirit of Scotland 1314. Something a little bit different for you today. This is a studio podcast that will be taken outdoors, but we're here today to discuss the earliest known illustration of the Battle of Bannockburn. And this is an amazing illustration, Mark, isn't it?
Absolutely fantastic. We don't have a lot of illustrations of drawings about the Battle of Bannockburn, but a canon, Augustinian canon called Walter Bower has included this in his chronicle called the Scotichronicon, and it gives us a wide perspective of the story of the Battle of Bannockburn. It's a conflation, but we're going to look at that today and look at what he's put in this illustration and see if we can get from that some information about the events that took place at Bannockburn that day.
As you say, it is a conflation and it's very detailed. So we have both days of the battle all pressed into one illustration. But when you look at it from top to bottom, from the castle, through the churches, through the streets, to what is obviously depicting moments from the first day of battle and falling on to the second day of battle, it's an amazing piece of work, isn't it?
It is. And although it was done sometime after the battle, in the 1440s, the Chronicle, the Scotichronicon, came out, it's clear that they've had first-hand knowledge because, as you say, contained within this is a high level of detail. And that's what we're going to look at today. But we'll talk about Walter Bower just for a second to explain to the viewers who he was. Well, Walter Bower was an Augustan canon, and he resided in a relatively remote place on Inchcolm Abbey on the River Forth. He was a student of St Andrews University and had also got trained by some Parisian canons as well, so there was a French connection there. A chap called Sir David Stewart, he commissioned the Scotichronicon, which is effectively a story about the history of Scotland, and it takes Scotland right back to the earliest days, and it makes links to the European early dynasties, the Romans, etc., and indeed the Egyptians. And it's a story that takes us right up to the 1400s, and there's so much condensed in there. And in that we have the Battle of Bannockburn. Now the drawing itself was probably done by one of Walter Bower's abbot friends. It would have been done in the scriptorium of the abbey, but clearly when you see what's on here, they must have visited the site because there is quite a level of detail. So here we have in this chronicle, as Max says, the earliest known illustration of the Battle of Bannockburn, and it's a fascinating piece for us to look at.
It's an amazing chronicle. If my memory serves me right, it's a chronicle that stretches over 16 volumes.
That's right.
And it even mentions the old medieval figure, legend or fact, we don't know, Robin Hood.
That's right. Robin Hood and Little John are mentioned in that as early as the mid to late 1200s as actual figures that existed.
So part of Edward II's War Among the Barons, and Edward I.
Edward I, that's right.
War Among the Barons. Yeah. So an amazing document. In Inchcolm Abbey, you can still go, there are some great part of the building still in preservation, and I think you can even visit the building where Walter Bower wrote the chronicle.
That's right.
Itself.
Because of its remote location, it's been well preserved. You can get yourself a ferry ride out there and it's well worth going out to see. Absolutely fantastic place. So shall we have a look at the illustration just in general, and then we can go out to the site and look in particular at certain areas?
Let's go through this. Most interesting.
So top to bottom, we're seeing in the background there Stirling Castle, perched on its rock, and coming down from there we see the church, which there's a bit of dubiety about. Is it the Holy Rood in Stirling, or is it St Ninian's Church, formerly Errol Church? We also see the housing of Stirling coming down clearly what is a hill there. The illustrator has made it clear that it is a hill that's coming down there. And then further down into that we see the depiction of the battle down on what looks like the Carshlands. The knights in armour, looks like Bruce on his horse, Edward perhaps fleeing, some of the battle scenes, and interestingly, the Bannockburn itself coming out onto the Cars. So let's look at some of these areas, Max.
I think one of the most striking parts of this illustration is right at the top of the page, and even although the top of it is cut off, is Stirling Castle itself. We are so used with seeing the later Stirling Castle, and of course it was demolished by Bruce near the end of the Scottish Wars of Independence. But you can see here, typical medieval fortification with its round towers, its outer palisades. It looks like a very striking landmark, which of course was the gateway to the north.
Absolutely.
The relief of Stirling Castle was the sole purpose that led to the Battle of Bannockburn.
Absolutely. It was like the brooch of Scotland, wasn't it? If you had control of that castle, you had control of Scotland.
Indeed.
In reality. And coming down from there, as we say, the church of, I believe it's the Holyrood Church that's depicted here. Others, as I say, will say it is St Ninian's.
So is that Broad Street?
I imagine that's Broad Street coming down there. You would have the richer bourgeoisie, is that what they're called, of the town closer to the castle at the top of the hill. And of course they used to say that all the muck flows downhill, so the poorer folk would be at the bottom. But that is the one of the nicer areas. You can see the quality of the housing there. Often in Scottish films, we depict it as mud huts that we lived in. That's not the case here. Stirling was clearly an important centre.
It certainly was, and these nobles would have lived in what was medieval luxury at the time. They would have had the trappings of leisure and comfort. So, unlike Wallace's village in Braveheart, where you had these mud huts and everything, it would have been quite sophisticated around the castle, with the churches, with the homes, with tanners' shops, butchers, and
all trades.
All of these things that constitute a large village or a small town.
And the church itself, the Holyrood, as I believe, we've got to be a bit careful with that. We don't know if that's an illustration of the earlier church, because the Holyrood, along with a large part of Stirling, actually burnt down in 1405. So is Bauer depicted here from memory or descriptions the earlier church, or is this a rough description or illustration of the later church after it was rebuilt after the fire in 1405? So that's something worth considering, but we'll go out and have a look on site at that.
It's a good point. And of course, further down, we do have St Ninian's Church. And it's important to recognise that St Ninian's Road was the main road that went up towards the castle, and St Ninian's Church had been there since the year 1242.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there was an earlier church on that side. What was it, Eccles? Or something it was called? Eccles Church. And the Pell Stream ran right through St Ninian's.
That's right.
And that's going to be a very important feature in understanding the ground for the Battle of Bannockburn later on.
Absolutely. So coming further down, we see something right in the middle of the illustration, which really sums up for a lot of people Bannockburn itself. And this looks like we've got Robert the Bruce and de Bohun, the knight who was killed in single-handed combat, right in the centre of this illustration.
It's a great illustration, and it's the first one that captivated me as a boy. I can remember the illustration and the large painting that they had at the National Trust Heritage Centre. But this has given birth, in many ways, to this duel. This night-on-night combat, and there are various versions of it. We have John Barber, we have the Vita Eduardis Secundi, who paint a very different picture. But I think when you look at the nobility of the horse, when you look at the man sat upon the horse, and you look at the size of this two-handed axe, to me that's very important, that this is most definitely a depiction of King Robert the Bruce.
Absolutely. And of course the crown on the head giving it away. And interestingly, as you point out, holding there in this illustration a two-handed axe, which we tend not to visualise, and certainly on the Pilkington Jackson statue, I think it's shown as a single-handed axe at his side. But so it's quite interesting to see in this illustration the two-handed axe. And in addition to that, we look at de Bohun, who is confronting here. Many people have an image of him attacking Bruce with the lance on his horse. But clearly here we see him, it looks like he's drawing a sword at his side.
He's certainly not lowering his lance. Now, this is where writings, John Barber writing many years after the battle, 63, 67 years, and we have this depiction that he attacked Bruce.
Yes.
And it's a great story, and it conjures up a great image in our minds. But yeah, it's certainly in the picture here, he is drawing a sword.
Yeah.
And of course, there are different accounts. I lean towards quite a bit the Vita Eduardi Secondi because it's the earlier account. In fact, it's an eyewitness statement of someone that was there at the battle, and the account was written not long after the battle, where it wasn't single-armed combat. Bruce did kill Bohun, but Bohun was one of the first to cross the Bannockburn at Milton Ford.
That's right.
Ride up onto the high ground because the Scots were seen straggling through the trees.
Yeah.
Found himself in a quagmire of trouble, reared up his horse, turned to get out of trouble because you got thousands of pikemen occupying that hill, and Bruce ran after him and he killed him.
Yeah. And that would have been a huge morale boost for the Scottish army, to see their king out in front, dealing himself with the nobility of England and basically winning the day. Would have been such a massive morale boost.
What's also interesting is that with Bruce holding a two-handed axe, now one of the accounts say that he clefted de Bohun's head.
That's right.
In two. Right down. Now, we know, because we had an earlier discussion, that's a very difficult thing to do, if not impossible.
Yes. If you've got the full armour, the great helm on, it's nigh on impossible. And there are videos on YouTube explaining very well. Matt Easton's got a video explaining that specifically, this confrontation between de Bruce and Bohun. It's very difficult to do that. In the illustration, we actually see de Bohun's visor on his helmet is up. So once again, what we've got to remember, this isn't a photographic interpretation of the battle. It is an artist who's done it based on the stories that he has. But we can still take from that conflation and try and create a narrative. But as you say, we are looking at a double-handed axe here, a visor that's open. Barber does say he cleft his head wide open. We don't know. We can only visualise and imagine what may have happened during that confrontation. Shall we go out to the site and have a look and perhaps look a wee bit more in depth about some of the actions that took place?
That'd be great to do that, yeah.
Let's go and do that then, and we'll come back to the studio. Well, Max, here we are. We've looked at Walter Bauer's illustration about where Bruce and de Bohun had their confrontation, and we've come down to the area adjacent to the Milton Ford. So what can you tell us about that area?
Well, we get a great view here looking down onto Milton Ford, but where we're standing high up on the hill here, and we're looking, if we take a look, the English army would have come down here. Now, they would have been in force, even although the vanguard was way in front of the other parts of the army. What you can see beyond you there is called the Cat Craig. Now, they've come down here, but what they're going to realise very, very quickly is that this is a bottleneck. It's closing. And the knights have to converge to get down this narrow pathway. What we know is that Philip de Mowbray, the custodian of Stirling Castle, has come out here. How he got past the Scots, we really don't know. The Scots perhaps permitted him to get past, but he's spoken to King Edward II and his commanders, and he has alerted them that the Scots have blocked off all the narrow roads into the forest in the new park. The Brown Lodge on the high green bank you see in front of you. So you have to, in your mind's eye, take away all these houses away. Here you will have some sparse woodland, and the woodland will get thicker and heavier as you go further into the new park. But Bruce is leading his division here, and he's protecting that. The English said that they saw Scots straggling among the trees. The English think that the Scots are running away, but they're not. They're just readying themselves for the inevitable English crossing of the ford.
Shall we go down and take a look at the ford?
Let's take a look.
So Max, we've come down from the high ground where the English would have come with the cavalry, down towards the Milton Ford. So here we are at the water in the Milton Ford itself. What would the English cavalry seen when they got down here?
So the English already have reports that the Scots are blocking the narrow pathways into the forest of the new park. As they come down here, we've seen how this narrows into a bottleneck. Now, when you cross Milton Ford, the path winds up to the right before it reaches the higher ground. And that's where Robert the Bruce, leading his division of Scots, are waiting. By the time they get to this ford, Henry de Bohun is with a retinue of Welsh. They're way ahead of the other cavalry. They come down here. He crosses this water in a plume of spray with the rest of them behind him. And suddenly when he gets onto the high bank, Bruce's schiltrums have come out. It says that Robert the Bruce came out of his hiding place. So sometimes we have this image of de Bohun seeing Bruce, and then you get this single combat. But Bohun was not alone here. He has his squires with him. He has other cavalry and soldiers with him. They come over here, and the chronicles say that they were met roughly by the Scots. The Scots are defending the high bank, while the rest of the English knights, who are only able to cross 3 or 4 at a time, just look how narrow this is, are coming behind Henry de Bohun. From this angle, you can see just where that brown lodge is, that's the high ground. You can see how the road has to curve to accommodate the slopes before the road straightens out again and goes straight on to St Ninians and onwards to Stirling Castle. Bruce, if you take away that lodge and those houses, Bruce is in those woods there. His schiltrums come out. So once the knights are crossing this ford, they're racing up round towards that high ground between the path and the lodge. The schiltrums set their pikes, and this is where the English were met roughly by the Scots. De Bohun finds himself in a quagmire of trouble. He reins up his horse, he turns, he flees, but he doesn't make it back over the water. Bruce comes out of his hiding place, as the chronicle says, catches up with him and fells him with his axe. So de Bohun has been killed along with his squires and some other soldiers, but the Scots, in their eagerness, they have gained a momentary victory. But Bruce, this is pure psychology here. Bruce has to draw that eagerness in. He has to rein them back. Their enthusiasm means go after the English. But if we just take a look, this is why the fight had to happen here. If we just take a look at the steepness of these escarpments as you go down to the Bannockburn, they are absolutely treacherous for mounted cavalry. And this is impassable for about a mile at either side of this ford.
So a fascinating start to the battle, Max, and the English getting a bloody nose. But it must have been congested. I often think about the numbers of cavalry that must have come down here. What do we think about the numbers of cavalry that have come down to this bottleneck?
Well, they are piling in minute by minute. We know it was greatly congested here. And we know that it was congested enough that Henry de Bohun and Robert Clifford, Thomas Grey among them, left with a party of 300 and odd knights to go back up here onto the Catcraig and try and find another way over the Bannockburn. Some have likely gone along this way as well, between Milton and Halbert's Bogs, to try and find a place. The nearest crossing point is Scotichronicon. It makes sense to try and get behind Bruce. So for this part here to be congested, I think you could easily, along these high banks, along this ford, you could easily have 1,000 to 2,000 knights trying to pile in.
Well,
These are effectively trapped.
Yes, that makes sense. The congestion must have been horrendous. And they've made the decision at some point, because Edward was in the rear, he's made the decision at some point that this is too difficult a crossing, and they've gone down onto the carstlands.
And the reason it's too difficult a crossing is because this is a bottleneck. It's like the 300 Spartans that held off thousands. It only takes a few if you have a bottleneck to hold off many. And the many will suffer the greater loss. Gloucester here was unhorsed at least once that we know of.
That's right.
A few knights have been killed, no one of real name. We just know that Gloucester was unhorsed. But this is carnage here for the English, and it's very disciplined fighting for the Scots.
And a great morale boost to see that their king has went one-on-one and came out victorious. That would have been a great morale boost for the Scottish troops.
It's the classic display of leadership. Bruce has come out here. He's not only gone after de Bohun, this is what the Vita Edward Secundii tell us. I've no doubt that Bruce had his fair share of killing here and that he was in the thick of it, not just directing things. He was able to keep the men, but what a booster for your king. This was why Bruce was a great king. It's throughout his history, he led from the front. He would lead from the front in day 2. He led his division here and he took out an up-and-coming young impetuous knight.
He was definitely the man that Scotland needed at that time to face up to the might of the English army, wasn't he?
And he's about 40 years old at this age, but he's a fit 40 years old. Some have said, or they've hinted, that Bruce may have been ill at the Battle of Bannockburn. I don't say that, because Bruce has killed here in day 1. He's led his division, and he is seen by the English chroniclers leading his army out in the main battle in day 2. Bruce was fighting fit in every respect of the word. What a leader. What a day. Bruce could not fail here. If the English had gotten over Milton Ford through Robert Bruce's division, it would have been game over. There would have been no Battle of Bannockburn in day 2.
So Max, here we are, from the Scottish perspective, looking back at the English positions, which we'll see shortly. But tell me, what would they have seen?
Well, you just get a really great idea of the high ground here and the advantage that the Scottish childrens had. What the Scots are seeing, they're well aware that the English are coming. They saw them gleaming in all their splendour. But the ford is becoming congested, so Henry de Bohun is one of the first across here. Robert Bruce comes out. You just imagine some sparse woods behind us here. He comes out of his hiding place, and if we just look ahead in front of us, Henry de Bohun comes racing up here around this path, and he is met roughly by the Scots. Now, we have to appreciate the fact that these Scots are well schooled. They've been schooled and drilled over and over again in the Torwood by Bruce. They know exactly what to do. De Bohun is killed. His squire's killed. But by this time, the English cavalry are piling in. What you can see in front of you, along this ploughed field, across the ford, are thousands of English trying to get into the fight. But this bottleneck is so tight, it's so sealed, that they are being killed easily, a few at a time. Dead horses lying around here. The Scots' pikes advance. They advance upon the English. Very few Scots, if any, lose their life here. But it is a bloody nose for the English.
Shall we take a walk down?
Let's do that. So if we look at this area here, I just imagine this congested with dead, wounded, dying knights and certainly dead horses. De Bohun, after he retreated from Bruce, may have been killed right in front of us, right here. He hasn't made it back across the water for two reasons. One, he wasn't quick enough. Two, it would have been so congested for him to do so anyway, unless the English were a bit later in coming.
There would be disbelief and panic amongst the English that their vanguard, their elite force, has been pushed back.
No doubt about it. I think De Bohun did try to get back over the water, like the Vita said, and he's been killed just before it. In their eagerness, Bruce has recalled the Scots to keep the shelter, get back onto their high ground, because the rest of the main English front line are coming down this bottleneck and they're about to cross this ford in a short amount of time, may even be a matter of 3 or 4 minutes. The Scots are going to be confronted with hundreds of mounted English coming down here, congested, no room to move, being unhorsed, being speared, being brought down from their horses and killed.
Now, when King Robert saw so near King Edward with his host appear, he mounted on a palfrey grey to set his army in array. Along the front from band to band he rode with battle axe in hand, and as he rode his helmet o'er, a hat of leather and stuff he wore, encircled with a golden ring, in token that he was a king. Those under Hereford's command and Gloucester's Earl were close at hand. Before them all in horseback sped, with spear in hand and helm on head. As brave a knight as e'er drew sword, kin to the Earl of Hereford, Sir Henry de Bohun in armour bright, keen to win glory in the fight. On his high steed he rode before the rest, a bowshot length or more. King Robert by the golden crown he wore, as he rode up and down, ranging his forces from the field, was plainly to the foe revealed. Sir Henry rode towards the king, who was when he saw his oncoming, and how before the rest he sped, to meet him, turned his palfrey's head. That when Sir Henry was aware that the good king would meet him there, he to the combat spurred amain, assured that he would quickly gain great glory, and would work his will upon a foeman horse so ill. Together to the charge they came, but bold Sir Henry missed his aim. The king high in his stirrup stood, wielding his war axe hard and good, and struck Sir Henry with such force that nothing could resist its course, but downward in its sheer descent, through hat and helm and head it went. The battle axe in two was smashed, the knight down to the ground was dashed, deprived by death of all his might. That was the first stroke of the fight.
Max have given us in great detail what happened on the first day of the battle, on the 23rd of June 1314. And we've looked at Walter Bauer's illustration, and from that we've expanded the story and came down to the site to see perhaps went on here. So shall we head back to the studio and look further at Bauer's illustration, see what else it might be able to tell us?
Let's take a deep dive into that, Mark. Yep.
Fantastic.
Welcome back to the studio. We've just been out at Milton Ford. As you saw, quite an experience once you get out there, Mark, isn't it?
When you actually get out to the battlefield area, you get a much better perspective of what could have happened. There's no doubt about it. You get a feel for how Bruce used the tactics to defend the approach up to the castle.
No doubt about it. Nothing beats walking the ground. Yeah. And myself and Mark have been out there scores, if not hundreds of times over the years, and something's different is to be gleaned from it every single time. So we looked at it from the position of Bruce and the Scots, and we looked at it from the approach of the English. Now, Bruce has killed De Bohun with a contingent of Welsh and his squires there. So it says that they were met roughly by the Scots.
Absolutely.
Bruce has to rein his men in, because what's inevitable is the rest of the English army are going to be piling in, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're on their way.
There must have been quite a bit of congestion there, because we've had a fairly sizable body of English have crossed the Milton Ford, after de Bohun's defeat, they're trying to get back across when there's others still coming forward. So there's going to be quite a bit of confusion, panic and congestion there, isn't there?
How do you imagine that English army looked, Mark?
Oh, they would have been spectacular. I mean, this was the biggest English army that had ever invaded Scotland, and they had come up here to effectively annihilate Bruce and his army. They wanted to wipe them off the face of the earth. They had all the great nobility were there, and they would have looked splendid. And indeed, it was described in the chronicles that they shone like angels in the sunshine.
And even mercenaries who had come from different parts of Europe. That they have their banners, they have their shiny armour, they have their colours, their heraldry, that they have come up to make a statement, haven't they? This is their glory field.
It would have been spectacular, and it would have been quite frightening to look upon that coming towards you. And indeed, some of Bruce's scouts had come back to him reporting this, but he kept that a bit quiet, didn't he? He didn't want to scare the men, but it must have been an awesome sight.
It must have also been terrifying. So the first of the English to arrive at Milton Ford are Gloucester and Hereford's contingent. And before long, Bruce had chosen, as we've seen, how much of a bottleneck Milton Ford is. Only 3-4 horses at a time can get over that part of the Bannockburn.
That's right.
And the way down to the Bannockburn is going to be congested in very, very quick time. So Bruce is occupied there. With that congestion, the knights need to find out alternative routes to try and come behind Bruce, don't they?